Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Prior to the 1979 revolution, the lion was a central feature on the Iranian national flag. The lion also happens to be a recurring theme in both of Israel's campaigns against the Islamic Republic, from rising to roaring. But what happens inside the lion's den of the Iran war is now up to the US president, namely Donald Trump, who has the various military, economic, diplomatic, and political factors to consider in a decision to either pursue the war now at the 11th day mark or wind it down. Joining us to analyze the current state of play include Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kuperwasser, who formerly served as the Director General of Israel's Ministry of Strategic Affairs, as well as head of the IDF Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Division, currently the President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Thank you for joining us, General.
My pleasure.
Pleasure is ours. Also joining us is Brigadier General in Reserve Relik Shafir, formerly an Israel Air Force commander, as well as a fighter pilot, among others. It's a pleasure having you with us as well, General.
Thank you.
Last but certainly not least is our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, the complexities of this ongoing conflict are vast. Nonetheless, it seems like at this point in time, both Israel and the United States acknowledge they are both ahead of schedule when it comes to achieving the various goals set out prior to the operation being launched on February of 28th.
Well, when you say ahead of schedule, it doesn't really mean that there was a joint common one, because Israelis usually are quicker than Americans in their campaigns. So they found probably some common goal, but had it been left only to the Israelis, it wouldn't have taken 3-4 weeks. This is the way it seems. But Secretary of War Hegseth and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane, had another briefing earlier today. And if one looks, for instance, at what General Kane said about the rate of missile launches, down 90%, one would have probably considered it a great achievement, and it is by Western standards. A Western military suffering such losses would have probably given up by now and tried to get a ceasefire. However, strategists from Napoleon to Clausewitz and others always noted that in war, the spiritual is more important than the physical. And therefore, if the Iranian leadership, the new leadership under Mojtaba Khamenei, if for them honor is more important than power per se, then they can keep this war of attrition for a longer time than it is feasible for the democratic administrations in Israel as well as in the United States.
I agree that both Jomini and Clausewitz, both military strategists, which Napoleon, which you refer to, has assumed, have highlighted that the battle of wills is the most important factor within prolonged conflict. Nonetheless, when we look at the situation related to the Islamic Republic of Iran, I don't think honor is necessarily the point that drives them, but rather the perception of honor and the perception of capacity to withstand foreign interference and foreign adversity, something that naturally, irrespective of what they say, because they tend to lie about everything in order to maintain that image, they don't seem to be very successful and will not have much left in order to sustain their capacity to export the revolution, which is a foundation of what they stand for. But nonetheless, I'd like to start with you, General Shafir, when we're talking specifically about the ongoing campaign, both the Israeli Air Force and the U.S. Air Force of Central Command operating in synergy, each one having their own missions and their own, so to speak, territory to focus on. But nonetheless, it seems like there is quite the impressive achievements being extracted from this current round or campaign, with the hope that this will indeed, all those tactical achievements, be at some point translated into a strategic victory. But let's focus for a moment on the current state of play. What do you see once you observe the theater in question?
I see that militarily it is a great success, both in the ability to have so many flights, sorties, and deliver so many munitions to targets that we're talking about. Obviously, the ballistic missile sites, hunting down the missiles. We're talking about the besieged forces and the IRGC, and targeting command and control posts, communications, etc., etc. So as far as that is concerned, I think it's a great success. We hear less of what the U.S. is doing in their area, which is the southern part of Iran and along the coast. But I would assume that since the tactics and the strategy is quite the same, that after 11 days, the main objectives have been realized, although the nuclear sites have not been taken care of as of this time by the B-2 in Fordow and other places. So as far as that's concerned, I think we are on the track. The other side is understanding what we're faced with, and I guess we'll relate to that as we go along this conversation.
General Kuperwasser, the intelligence community is also hard at work, both the American and Israeli intelligence communities operating in synergy once again, since Mossad and Central Intelligence have also conducted very close operations during Operation Rising Lion back in June. Now what we see is no less than that level of cooperation, but also military intelligence, providing the intelligence necessary to degrade the Ayatollah regime's military arms, to include the RGC, the Basij, and other components of this tyrannical group of people. What can you tell us about the complexity at hand, considering the fact that there's still plenty of targets that are out there? Of course, we know what we know. We may not know everything that we know, but we certainly don't know everything we don't know.
Yes, we came back to good old days. The situation is such, the intelligence cooperation is just like the operational cooperation, exquisite. Say that you can't dream of such a cooperation, a sharing of information, joint operations for collecting intelligence, and working on intelligence gathered by the other side when necessary, because there is division of labor between the IDF and the Israeli Air Force and the American, so that information that is collected by one side can be shared with the other, so they can act upon. And usually this cooperation on targets is not something that is easy to establish. So you got to have a lot of trust in each other to work upon the information delivered by the other side. And here we are, we're doing that in a very impressive way. And the results speak for themselves. It's as both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump say, we are ahead of schedule. We are hitting more targets than we thought we should be able to hit by that time. And we have established air superiority and air dominance throughout the center and the western part of Iran, which enables us to operate freely in those areas and to hit as many targets as we can. And that's one side of the cooperation. There's another issue of intelligence cooperation that is more complicated, and this is understanding what is going to happen on the other side of on the other goal of this operation. Because we focus on the obvious goals of the operation, which are to degrade the capabilities of Iran and bring it to actually deny it from the capability to develop nuclear weapons, to develop ballistic missiles, and to launch ballistic missiles, and to support its proxies. And all of that is being done by attacks on targets that eventually add up to a certain quantitative result that you can say, okay, we hit 80 of the 100 facilities that are involved in producing the nuclear weapon for Iran. So we still need to hit 20 more, and we had completed 80% of our project. But the other goal is much more complicated. The other goal is that speaks about preparing the ground, paving the ground for the people of Iran to take to the streets and remove the regime from power. This is something much more complicated, much less quantitative and much more qualitative in assessment. And I don't know to what extent Israel and the United States cooperate in this assessment, because this is now being pushed to the side because of the complexity. And we hear less, especially from the United States, reference to this goal of the operation. If you listen to Secretary of War Hexet, and definitely to President Trump yesterday, they didn't refer that much, or sometimes at all, to this question of preparing the ground for regime change. And this is where the intelligence has to also work hard and together in order to evaluate what is the situation in this respect, and to what extent the opposition is ripe and the people of Iran are able to go to the streets and change the regime. A lot of work quantitatively is being done in degrading the capabilities of the regime to govern. There's an ongoing effort to hit the leadership. There's ongoing effort to hit the regime's security apparatuses. And we just were told today that the commander of the Basij was eliminated, which is a nice step forward, but they have 700,000 people in the Basij, so it's good to start with the head. But there's a lot of work still ahead of us. And eventually, I think that in this respect, what's most important is how much time do we have? Because if you listen to President Trump, you get the feeling that we don't have that much time. He's so pleased with the results and denying Iran from having the capabilities that he says to himself, okay, well, the mission is more or less accomplished. Let's keep doing a little bit and some final steps, and we're done. And from the point of view of preparing the ground for the people to take over the control of Iran, it's not the same timetable. It will take much more time, and we have to see whether we have the time for that or not.
I think one of the points that needs to be taken also into account that the rollback, so to speak, by the Trump administration from focusing overly on establishing the right circumstances for the people to rise and seize their own future, so to speak, in liberty, is something of heightened expectations. Naturally, that is not something that they feel comfortable selling to the American people at this point in time without some type of guarantee. And it's not a low-hanging fruit. It's something that needs to be worked for. General Shafir, I'd like to ask you on that, since if we really look at what happened, for instance, in the former Yugoslavia, when there was a campaign of roughly 11 weeks, more than 70 days, in which we saw the United States leading a coalition of NATO members and really degrading the former so-called forces of Milosevic, primarily Serbian forces, they really managed to degrade them to a point where subsequent actions in low signature capacity were ultimately facilitated, which brought about a military coup from the inside of the military ranks, which is something that now we do hear President Trump coming out and stating that is a preferred method. That is something that is similar to what happened in Venezuela. And look how that worked out.
Well, this is a completely different story. Let me go to 2 points in time that may teach us what's up ahead and we are to expect. The first one is October 2nd, 680, which is almost 1400 years ago, which created the Shia ideology of suffering and martyrdom. The second point is let's look at the 1980 to 1988 war of Iran with Iraq. They were 30 million people at the time. They lost 1 million people in that war. Isfahan and Tehran were rocketed weekly with missiles, and they were sending kids to blow up landmines along the front. And they depleted all their human resources, military resources, economic ones, to a point where Khomeini at the time had to give up and ask for a ceasefire. So their ideology, coupled with the experience they had, it's not until they are lowered to their knees, so to speak, that they can allow themselves to stop the war and come to terms. And in this case, I think what will happen is that within a few weeks, the United States will declare that they've won the war and go into an economic blockade, providing they're able to stop Iran from shooting at ships at the Hormuz Straits from the land to sea missiles and drones by some technology or accompanying ships, and allow for the or at least pay for some of the insurance premiums for the countries and the shipping that has to go through. We're talking about 20% of the world oil that goes through that area. So I think this is what we are up against in the near future.
Absolutely. Well, General Kuperwasser, I'd like to ask you also about the oil industry, so to speak, which is obviously very concerned. There is a risk factor that naturally will showcase some fluctuations in the markets. But looking specifically from a strategic power competition prism, the Islamic Republic of Iran, it's more than 90% of oil exports and energy products was earmarked for China, which amounted to roughly 14% of the energy intake of Beijing. Something that obviously right now there is a gap. There is a gap for this economy that is hurting, irrespective of the current situation vis-a-vis Iran. Now, that must be part of the American calculation, considering the day and age that we're living in. But how do you see that actually translated into action?
Well, first of all, we are 10 days into this war, 11 days into this war. It's too short a time to cause any shortage of anything anywhere. It's all about expectations. And the expectations are that if this is going to last enough time, then there's going to be some shortage of supply for China, but they can find other markets other sources to buy their oil from. They don't have to buy it from Iran. And I'm sure that the United States is going to make sure that there's going to be enough oil supply in the global markets, and they can use their strategic petroleum reserves for that purpose if they need to. And anyhow, from the Iranian point of view, is they are not against exporting their oil to China, so it's not going to harm the passage of Iranian oil through the Hormuz Straits. Only those ships, tankers that are delivering for other oil. So I don't think that China should be that worried. They are worried, but not too worried at this point. And if the Americans are going to stop the war sooner than later, then of course this is a positive development from the point of view of China. The impact on the oil market is, as I said, is about expectations, and this is why the oil prices went up so much, although less than they could have. And the Americans are making an effort to make sure that it is not going to go skyrocketing, and it's going to be under control. And the question is, I follow what Relik said, General Shafir said, that much depends on the capability of the Americans to secure the flow of oil through the Hormuz Straits. If they keep sinking the Iranian ships and taking the necessary effort to hit the goals along the Gulf, along the Straits on the Iranian side, that serve as a threat for the safety of the shipping there, then we can move to the next phase and put this economic strangling of Iran without continuing the war. This is something that can happen, and but it has to be established, and it's not yet there. The Americans are threatening that they are going to do that, but it's not yet there, and there's a question mark about the safety of shipping in the Straits. And this, of course, raises the insurance prices, and that makes eventually the price of oil higher.
Absolutely. Well, that is just one factor. There is another factor, Mr. Oren, and that is the neighboring Gulf states, which have been subject to repeated attacks by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. The Ayatollah regime has miscalculated when it comes to that, since we do see the Gulf countries siding with America within this equation, and not just condemning, but also going out of its way to expel the Iranian diplomats and to conduct all kind of other activities that are less publicized. But nonetheless, in this context, we heard President Trump say, if Iran continues doing so and targeting the energy infrastructure, civilian in those Arab countries and the Strait of Hormuz, we will go after Iran's energy infrastructure, which would obviously be devastating for any government that may rise within Iran in the short to medium term, even to the long term. What are we to expect, though, from the current state of the Gulf countries, which are really being hurt in this context?
Rather than taking the risk of challenging President Trump's assumption, let me take issue with your observation. The Iranians have wisely attacked the Gulf countries. It was not foolish. It was not an act of madness. The center of gravity in their eyes is the economy, the energy, not only in these particular countries, but as you all referred to, the entire world, China, and all the rest. So they know that while the center of gravity for the Americans is the regime or the military force of Iran, for Iran it is better to hit the weak points, not the strong ones. And therefore, they have managed to get the Gulf countries to put pressure on the United States to stop the war. They have not succeeded yet, but there is this pressure, which apparently was not part of the calculations in the run-up to the war. This has surprised both the victims of this aggression as well as the Americans. And this cannot go on much longer because of the domestic repercussions in the United States. The price of petrol at the station, and this is still winter. Heating oil is up. So yes, it is a battle of wits, a battle of wills. And in the next few days, we will see who is stronger.
Well, you referred to Napoleon earlier. Napoleon stated that when you see your enemy making a mistake, let them do it, and don't hinder them from continuing doing so. The fact of the matter is the Kingdom of Bahrain has a defense treaty with Great Britain, or the United Kingdom at this stage, which is now sending highly likely 2 aircraft carriers to the region in order to protect Bahrain. The same goes for Australia, that is now entering the fold We see more and more French vessels entering the fold. So all those countries that did not look to partake in those activities and have acted in a really isolationist manner, and I'm being diplomatic here, are drawn in because of Iran's actions against those Gulf countries, including Qatar, by the way.
But you've probably seen Trump's sarcastic message to Prime Minister Starmer. Oh, thank you for joining the war after we won.
Well, I don't think he's doing it for Trump's sake. I think that he has his other concerns at heart, including the LNG exported from Qatar,
but by the time
that is
he gets
filling the energy necessities of the United Kingdom. Naturally,
too late.
It is too little, too late, and some may refer to him as the predecessor of Winston Churchill rather than Churchill himself. But we have less than a minute. Very briefly, General Shafir, General Kuperwasser, in one sentence, what should we focus on moving forward?
I think we should focus on the ability to stop the drones and remove the ground-to-sea batteries along the coast. These are the two critical issues that can help secure shipping on the one hand and go into a blockade, because obviously Trump is under pressure to finish the war for the difference that we haven't discussed today, but that is obvious. So these are the 2 points. There's technology.
Thank you, General.
And there's intelligence.
Thank you, General. General Kuperwasser, 20 seconds.
Yeah, I think that the most important thing is to see whether Trump is really interested in finishing and ending the war in the immediate future or in a couple of next days or not, because the timetable is the most important thing determining the results of this war.
Indeed. Well, General Kuperwasser and General Shafir, I'd like to thank you for all of your valuable insights today. Thank you also to Mr. Amir Oren, of course, and to you at home. And until our next edition from here in Jerusalem, Shalom.